Women have been giving birth for centuries, so it's a pretty natural experience, right? Wrong. I'm Stephanie King, professional doula, childbirth educator, and the creator of the My Essential Birth course, the online childbirth education course that's helping women everywhere confidently achieve their best birth. Today's culture would have us think that birth should be treated like an illness or an emergency, and that most of us need other people telling us what's best for our bodies because we aren't the experts. So sit tight, because if you're tuning into this podcast, you'll probably start to believe in your body, your intuition, and find yourself empowered and confident to do what it takes to have the birth of your dreams. If you like listening to me take you through these weekly topics step by step, then you're going to love the My Essential Birth course. Make sure that you're subscribed to the podcast, and definitely head over to myessentialbirth.com for the free downloads mentioned right here in these episodes, and to join the birth course and community full of pregnant moms just like you. I have to add a disclaimer that I am not a medical professional and I cannot provide medical advice. All of the information expressed in this podcast are based off of personal, professional, and educational experiences and are my own opinions. Please work with a provider you trust for medical advice during your pregnancy and birth. Reviewer of the week, Liana Chavez 2, says informative and unbiased. Hi, not sure what my username is on here, but my name is Liana. I'm 20 years old and currently 16 weeks pregnant with my very first baby, and I've been listening to this podcast since I was 4 weeks pregnant. I'm a researcher. I won't even take a medication until I've researched class, possible side effects, and interactions. This podcast has been such a good resource for me to jump off of, because the second I found out I was pregnant, I all caps knew I had to find accurate and reliable sources about pregnancy and childbirth. Originally, I was hoping to specialize in pediatrics, but this podcast has made me want to change and specialize in obstetrics. Yes, I feel like we need more of you out there. I'm 100% feminist, and I want to give women a voice and the access to giving informed consent, because there's so much misinformation out there. I could not agree with you more. Thank you for everything that you do and the countless hours that must go into making these episodes. My husband and I are going to be joining your birth course very soon, and I hope to maybe one day be on your podcast. Liana, I hope that too. I hope you have all of the information in front of you. You have an incredible experience, and you get to jump on the podcast with me. I would absolutely love that. Now, I have a special deal for you guys this week, because it is Thanksgiving week and we are starting the Black Friday deal early. This will go until Monday the 28th till 10 p.m. Eastern time. But if you purchase in full the My Essential Birth course, you're going to get all of the things that come with the birth course, which is the 200-page, gorgeous, beautiful workbook that comes with it. You get lifetime access to the private Facebook group. You get downloadable meditations. You get labor rehearsals, all the information you could possibly need for you and your birth partner for your pregnancy, labor, and birth experience. That includes understanding what labor is doing and all of that kind of stuff, exercise, nutrition, postpartum, all that stuff. But if you guys do it this week for the Black Friday deal, we're also giving you a bonus meditation track. This is specific just for you that are purchasing 25 printable birth affirmation cards. They are gorgeous and so good. I feel like these are the affirmations that come up the most. These are the things that are really filling you guys, and just that women are able to take into their birth space and feel so empowered, things that you can use every day, and you can print them and put them in your birth space. And a belly mapping guide. So if you're ever wondering, what position is my baby in? Are they breech? Are they left occiput posterior? Are they left occiput anterior? And if you don't know what I'm talking about, don't worry. We're going to talk about it in the guide. Basically, where is my baby's head? Where is their bottom? And where are their little fingers and toes? If you're ever curious about that, the belly mapping guide is going to be an awesome bonus for you as well. So if you guys jump in this week through the 28th, Monday, 10 p.m. Eastern time, all of those bonuses are for you. That's a bonus meditation track, 25 printable affirmations, and a belly mapping guide. So I hope to see you guys in the course this month. For today's episode, this was kind of prompted by several messages that I've received in the last couple weeks on Instagram, and it has to do with, where do I find a provider? So I'm like, you know what? Let's just get it out there for everybody, because I know it's kind of like a top question. If I'm over here on the podcast telling you, you need to get a good provider, this is the person that needs to be in your corner. That is your like top tier, your birth team starts with that person. And then I don't tell you where to find them. Well, that's not very helpful. So I'm going to do that for you today. This week, I'm going to have an Instagram post that goes up. I would love for you to be able to share this week, if you have an incredible provider, where you are at, and not you specifically, but where the provider is located, what their name is, and why they are a great provider. You don't have to talk about your specific situation, but if you're willing to share that, I think it's really important for women to hear, like, I'm planning to have an epidural and, do this, this, and this. These are some of my birth preferences. When I talk to them, this, and this happened, or this is how they've been in appointments. That is the kind of information that's going to be really useful to women that are looking for providers in their area. And I know recently I've had women who have reached out that are kind of in these more like back town, rural areas. And that does make it more difficult. And I'm going to kind of talk about that as well. Like, what do you do if you don't have a local provider that's good for you? So let's talk about where to find a good provider. I'm going to tell you right now, if you are in an area where you have some local childbirth educators, people that like feet on the ground, they're in the birth world, they know those things, that would probably be my number one place for you to look. That and a doula. So if you have doulas close by and if you have childbirth educators close by, reach out to them. These are people that care about birth, that they probably have had experiences in your area with birth, whether or not they're their own experiences or they're people that they're teaching, and they care about what they do. You wouldn't be a birth educator if you didn't have a passion for it. It's not just something that you're like, hey, I have an idea on how to bring in some extra money. It is a passion for women that teach it. Like, hands down, I can't say that I've met a birth educator that didn't at some point have passion. I'm not going to say that I haven't met them that have gotten over their passion, but I have met them that, like, when you start, you got passion. If nothing else, they definitely have resources for you, or they absolutely should. So if you reach out to someone and they say they don't know, keep looking, because they just should. Like, for myself, okay, I will admit right now, we've just moved to Florida. I know nobody here. I cannot give any recommendations, but I'm already plugged into some online Facebook groups, some doula groups, some birth education groups. And so if I had to find that for somebody, I could reach out directly there and say, hey, I'm looking for this and this. My client is here, whatever the case. And I can get help that way. So in other words, this person is going to have some connections for you. Okay, so where do you find local childbirth educators and doulas? If you have local groups, okay, for example, when I was in Utah, it was Utah Doula Association. And they have like an online platform where they host all their doulas. You can like search for somebody in your area. You can search for people that way. So if you are in a location, you might want to start looking for something similar to that. Not every state is going to have that. Not every, county or whatever area that you're in is going to have that by any means, but that's somewhere to look. Another place that you can look is a birth center. So if you have any like home birth midwives near you or birth centers near you, you can reach out to them and ask for their local childbirth educators and doulas. Now, obviously, reaching out to local birth centers and home birth midwives, if you're looking for a home birth experience or an out-of-hospital experience, you can go directly to that source as well. But I would look for people that recommend people, and it will be really helpful if you're reaching out to these doulas, for example, and you say, hey, this is my situation. This is what I'm looking for. Who do you recommend? Because they work with providers all the time. And so even if you reach out to a local midwife, it might not be the fit for you. So grab some recommendations first, and then you can move on and figure out which of those recommendations work for you. Doulamatch.net is another place that you can look for doulas, and now they have childbirth educators on there within the last couple years. Doulamatch.net is nice because if your profile should be like, it bumps them to the top if they're active. So when you look in your area, you're looking for a doula or childbirth educator, in order to stay active and come up closer to the top, doulas and childbirth educators have to physically go in there and update their calendar and update their information consistently. So those are the people you want to reach out to because those are the ones that are active. Okay, now you can also look at local Facebook groups. Local Facebook groups are awesome, especially if they're a birth group. I'm not necessarily talking about the moms groups. You guys know how I feel about those, personal feelings. Although sometimes those can totally work too. Like even if you get a bunch of really awkward comments, you might get a couple that are really helpful in there. But if you type in things to Facebook like, my location, so we'll say, say Orlando, right? So you type in like Orlando doulas. into Facebook and see what pops up, or Orlando Birth Group. And so you just kind of like type in your city or your location and see what pops up, or your county and see what pops up. If you add in a couple of those keywords, it might pop up some really good things. And that would be a place for you to ask questions, join the group, reach out to people. That's a really good place too. If you have physical local birth groups, such as actually like a La Leche League, La Leche League meeting, those are free, they're friendly, they're breastfeeding education. But you can also just come there and check them out. In fact, I recommend doing that before you have your baby. So it's a comfortable space. You've already met the women. You know what it's going to be like. Like, it might be really awkward that first time, just if you've never been into a La Leche League meeting, just like it is going into any meeting. Like, you're like, I don't really know anybody yet. So make yourself a little bit comfortable there. But it's a great place to, like, you're going to meet other women. They're breastfeeding. They've likely given birth recently. Those might be really great people to reach out to as well. And then just other birthy kind of groups. For example, when I was in Davis County, myself and a couple of doulas had like a positive birth group that we would do, and people would come monthly and there'd be information there. And it was taught by all of us who were doulas. So if there's groups like that, that might be a really good thing too. A lot of times those groups happen at things like birth centers. So again, that it's just find your local area, and that's a really good place to be able to find them. And then I was going to say too, it's really important that you interview several for yourself. So yes, you're getting recommendations. Yes, that's kind of like where to find them. But you can also just go online and you're like, okay, my insurance takes this, this, and this. These are the providers. I'm going to interview one from each group. You know, I had Megan Heaton on here recently. I'll link the podcast below. She interviewed 11 providers. And then at like 30 something weeks, while she was with a certain provider that she was super happy with in the hospital, decided to switch to a home birth with a separate provider. You have the power to do that. And I think it's really important that whoever you choose, that person is in your corner, and they're going to be rooting for you, on the same page, supporting you in how you desire to give birth. Personality is going to add into that. Skill set's going to add into that. Preferences are going to add into that, where they give birth or can provide the services for delivery in a hospital setting or at a home birth. The policies of those different places are going to add into that. So keep all of that in mind as you are searching for your perfect provider. Now, I think the other thing that's important to talk about, like I'd mentioned before, is what happens if my insurance doesn't take this, or, you know, this out-of-hospital birth provider costs a lot of money, even though I would prefer to be there, or I don't have any hospitals or birth people like in my area that support what I'm doing at all. Like, there's one hospital and I don't agree with this, this, and this. Like, we're definitely on a different page. Their policies don't match what I'm looking for, all of that. If that's the case, and this is going to be tough love for those that are listening, because I've been here, you may consider, and you might want to consider, reaching out to people instead of like baby shower things, which, not that you don't need certain things for your baby and stuff. So you'll just have to prioritize and decide what's important for you now and what you can actually do. Reaching out to people and asking, like, instead of getting, you know, this nice romper, maybe we can add money into this savings account or whatever, so that I can have the birth I'm looking for. And that can include whether you're looking to be able to be at with a home birth midwife that costs a couple of $1,000s that's not covered by insurance, or if you're like, we need to travel, I need to not be in this location, so I am willing to cross state lines, I am willing to camp out at a hotel like a week or so in advance before my due date. Sometimes you have to make that sacrifice, or you have to make that decision for yourself that you're gonna sacrifice. And by no means, when I am saying that, am I trying to say this is only for people who can, quote unquote, afford it. And I know that those of you that are listening, there's going to be many of you who are like, there's no way I can make this happen. In some cases, that's going to be true no matter the case. But I will tell you from personal experience, and just from life experience, when we prioritize things in our lives, all of a sudden we can create a way for it. And I don't know if you've heard that. There's kind of like this quote that goes around, like, either you make an excuse or you make a way. I love that quote. I think I might post that on Instagram this week. You make an excuse or you make a way. And I will tell you, from our third baby, now, if you guys know anything about us, like, we were a military family. We were living on base at the time. We had no extra funds, and I mean nothing. Anything that we used, we are members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. We go to temples to do some of our to do work for our ancestors and things like that. It's really important to my husband and I. Literally all of the money that we had during that time, because the temple that we would go to, there was one locally and it was over an hour and a half away, we would spend on gas and snacks for there and back with our kids. We would go like every weekend, and that is where our extra money would go. And I'm talking like a couple $100s a month extra was literally what we had. And what we ended up doing, because that is also when I had my baby born at home, was we used our entire tax return and we like skimped on everything we could, like groceries and gas. I stopped going places. I wouldn't buy anything at Target. I mean, literally for months, we skimped on every single thing that we could so that we could use all of our tax return and any extra money that we had to pay our midwife and to pay our doula, because those things became such a high priority to me that it was like, if we didn't have a car and we needed to get a car for our family to be able to drive to work and things, like it was so essential at that point that I made those sacrifices. So I'm absolutely not calling on you guys to force everybody into doing that by any means, but I do want to say if you make it a priority, you can find a way. So just a little food for thought. Now, there's going to be some of you that are like, this just is what it is. And I can't either emotionally, I can't go there, or like physically, we are just like, it's not going to happen. And if that's the case, you do the best with what you have. That's where something like a Great Birth Course can come in. I'll tell you, My Essential Birth, we have a payment plan where it's $75 a month for 3 months that you can pay that way, or you can do the pay in full and you save a little money. But utilizing something like that, and you're like, okay, I don't have the money for a doula. I don't have the money for this excellent provider because all of these people suck and I don't have money to go do these other things. If that's the case, you train up your husband and you get really, really educated on what you're doing. If you don't have the money for a birth course, then you listen to every episode of this podcast and you do the free exercises and you do everything in your power to read and to learn and to practice and get your body ready in every way for that birth. And you be prepared to advocate for yourself, because even if you have a provider that you're going to have to fight against, which is always not the ideal, but even if that is the case and you are prepared and you are ready to stand up for yourself and you are educated in those decisions, you still have a say. You still get to decide. You still get to write that birth story with you and your birth partner. So it's going to be a matter of not just knowing for yourself, but training up that birth partner really solid so that you can support each other in this very important life-altering experience that you're going to have. And it's wonderful too, you know, even if you have the funds to do whatever you want to do, that communication and time with your birth partner, nothing can replace that, you know. And so making sure that you're on the same page, and if your birth partner can support you through this most vulnerable time, it's just gonna make your guys' relationship so much better, so much more solid. And after it's all said and done, I mean, there's just a bond that you get no other way. You get no other way. And especially when you are supported going through something so difficult, you can't help but feel loved and attached to that person. And I think it's really great too, watching dads who are like, oh my gosh, she just did that thing. Like, you are so powerful. You were so strong. I can't believe you just did, like, all of the things. You both have a chance to really fall in love with each other, maybe even all over again. So I hope some of that information is helpful. I in no way mean to harm or make anybody feel like, oh, I wish I could and I can't. So please understand that. But I do think it's worth the conversation. And I think it's worth working for and sacrificing for if there's something important to you in regards to your birth. Now, I want to touch on some questions that I think are really important. Once you've got your recommended providers, once you're able to go interview these people, let's talk about a couple of the questions that are going to make a really big difference for you. And remember that these will vary and you will find different variations or completely different questions based on what your desire is for your birth. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, I think understanding their cesarean rates would be at the top of my list. Now, that's whether or not you can choose to go to this provider. You have to go to this provider. You need to know what you're up against. So cesarean rates for somebody like me. So you come in, you're healthy, you're low risk, it's your first baby, you know, whatever. Or cesarean rates for like you're overweight, you've got some gestational diabetes or some other high risk factors, or you've had a cesarean birth before, or this is, your third baby, but your first one was a cesarean, or whatever that looks like for you. Like, you need to tell your story and then ask, for someone like me, what do you think, a cesarean rate would look like for me? Or based on the women that you've served and the cesareans that have happened in your practice, what are my percentage rates looking like? Like, tell me a little bit about that. And how they respond to that can matter too, because if they are like, well, most, first time moms or most moms like this, but we'll do this. And they say it in such a way that's like, this is kind of just how it's going to be, versus something like, well, most moms do this. This is what I've seen. However, it's going to be based on what's happening with you, and we'll take it moment by moment, and we'll discuss and talk about options. How the information is given, or the answer back to that question, is going to matter too. Particularly if you've had a VBAC, you're going to obviously have VBAC specific questions for that provider. And I'll put the questions in the show notes, because that episode with Megan Heaton has the questions that you can ask your provider, red flags that you can look for. So that would be VBAC specific questions for that provider. And, including things like VBAC calculator. How do you assume that's going to be successful? Do we call it a trial? Is it going to be like a case by case basis? That kind of stuff. The other thing, this is for everybody. Due dates. I would talk to your provider about due dates from the very beginning. It would be, how do you calculate a due date? If this is you, if I know when I ovulated, and like how long my cycles are, and if you have all of that information, and when we had sex, and we know implantation, all this stuff. If you have that information and you offer it to them, like, I know this, this, and this, will you adjust accordingly or not? That's important to know. And then I would go into so after you're like, how do you calculate it? Which most of them are going to go first date of last period, but it's at least, if you have that information, you can definitely at least tack it on. And then I would ask, do you ever change the due date, the guest date? Do you ever change this, and how? How does that happen? Is it based off of fundal height? Do you do a late term ultrasound, and will you adjust because of the ultrasound size? Those are things that I would ask, because we know that due dates based off of those other things. So we've been told, and we're aware, if conception date and if you have all of that information, that's going to be your most accurate no matter what. Second to most accurate of knowing exactly all of that information is going to be an ultrasound between 11 and 13 weeks. And past that point, those other things are not accurate. They're just not. It's just information. It's, it is what it is, but it does not tell you when you're going to have your baby. Nothing. So those would be questions to ask. Do you ever change the due date? How and what do you use in order to do that? Should you change the due date? I think, anyways, because that's going to determine other things like the next question. And let's talk about induction. How often do you induce? And what do you induce for? What are your most common reasons for induction? If the first thing that comes out of their mouth is, well, of course, if you've got a mom, getting ready to pass her due date, or I like to schedule inductions, we'll schedule your induction 39 weeks. We'll schedule just a week out in case baby doesn't come by 40 weeks. If you're hearing things like that, that should tell you this might not be great, or at least this is what I'm going to have to deal with coming up to there. So I'm aware. So it would be like, what about going past my due date? Why else would something be offered? Is it only in case of, higher risk situations? And then asking if you recommend one and I agree to that, how are they done? And just see how they respond to that. Like, what if you agree, which, yeah, you should get to agree. You can also say no to an induction, but how are they done? And I think that's really important, because then too, you're going to know what you're up against. If this is an induction that's done, you're going to be later in the pregnancy. Almost all inductions, if possible, they're going to want to be done 36 weeks plus, right? But do I have to come in at night? Do I have the option to come in the morning? If I schedule it really early out, should I need an induction? Can I change, like where you're used to doing it at night? Could I do it during the day instead? Or if they do it during the day and you want to do it at night, you get to pick all those things. So I would ask what that looks like. And then it's like, do you use Cervidil? Do you use Cytotec? We're going to use a Foley bulb? Any like creams or ripening or opening? What does that look like? Are you going to break my water? All of that stuff matters. So that's a conversation to have beforehand. Along with that is, what about if my water breaks? Kind of like leaning on what we were just talking about. What if my water breaks? What if there's a trickle? What if it breaks at home? If it is clear and odorless and I'm not having contractions, when do you want me to come in? Do I have to come in right away? If it's clear, odorless, and I'm having contractions, how long can I labor at home? These are questions to ask. The truth is, you get to choose all of those things, but you want to hear those responses, especially in regards to something like water, because if you are, for example, looking to go unmedicated or looking to labor through things for quite a while before receiving an epidural, knowing that you're like, as soon as I step in those doors, I know I'm asking for the epidural, and so I would like that to be a little bit later. Well, then you're going to want to be able to spend some time at home. And many providers, and it depends on how you discuss it with your provider over the phone when it happens too. Like if you're calm and collected and you're like, I've done this, I'm just letting you guys know, this is what I'm going to do. I'll be at home for a bit. I'll call if I need anything. Well, that's different than somebody calling in and you're like, so my water just broke and it's clear, and I'm not having contractions, but am I supposed to come in? Should I come in? And they can hear the tone of your voice. They're always going to tell you to come in. So, but if you want to stay at home and it is clear and odorless and there's, nothing going on, you can feel your baby moving, you're having contractions or you're not, then you can choose to stay at home. So, but having that conversation beforehand is going to go a long way. Another great question to ask is, how do you feel about doulas and birth plans? Oh, I love this question. I love it because it gives you an idea of how other people in the birth space are going to be treated and how you'll be treated for having them there. And hopefully the response is really positive, very happy, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes you hear things like, I've had a couple of doulas that have come and, they just seem to get in the way, or they're disrespectful, or, whatever they end up saying. Maybe they have. I would hope the majority. That's not true. But it'll give you an idea of how this provider chooses to work with other people that might have different opinions than him in that space. Because when you're working with nurses and stuff, for example, at a hospital, that provider, they're always going to be on the same page. The nurses and the provider almost always are going to be on the same page because the nurses are getting what they're supposed to be doing from that provider. They're just helping the provider out. They're there to help you too, but in a way that supports the provider. So, and hospital policy. So you have to keep that in mind. So when you're bringing an outside person in, usually friends and family, they're like, oh yeah, if you want people in there. But as soon as you say something like doula, or you bring up something like a birth plan, it'll give you an idea of how they feel about your opinion on your birth. And so I love that question. How do you feel about doulas? And if I bring a birth plan? Just really innocent. Ask that question. Another question. Am I able to labor and, really importantly, push in any position I don't want to be on my back? If this is important to you, if this is something that you're looking to do, remember, I will just tell you, I don't have studies for it, but from my personal experience, and I've attended a decent amount of births, if a mother can be more upright, there is less chance of tearing when she's pushing. So anyways, that just kind of food for thought. So just knowing that you have the option, even if you choose to give birth on your back, in maybe a more, reclined position with legs up, or however you choose to do it. But asking that, how am I able to labor in any position, and particularly pushing, how do you feel about that? And if it's like, nope, we always do it on the back, it's the safest for mom and baby. Well, that's not true. It is the most convenient for a provider for you to be on your back with your legs up, so they can sit in their stool and be ready to catch a baby. It is not the safest, it's just as safe to squat down next to the bed or be on hands and knees or hanging over the bed. There's no unsafe position to give birth to a baby that I can think of in this moment. And that includes being able to give birth in water. So it's what is comfortable to mom and comfortable for baby. Now, if you run into something like shoulder dystocia, that's a separate conversation. However, guess what? If you are leaned back in the bed and pushing a baby out and shoulder dystocia is happening, oftentimes, and if the provider is well-versed, in my opinion, they'll have you switch over to hands and knees anyways. So it's kind of a funny, because it can help dislodge a baby. Ina May, I'll put the book in here. Her Guide to Natural Childbirth, she talks about all that. It's incredible. Anyways, so am I able to labor in and push in any position? How often do mothers need episiotomies? I like that question because it lets me know, how hands-on are you down there? What are the most common reasons that you offer an episiotomy? And I want to hear things like, if this were me, I would want to hear things like Like if, we're seeing D cells at the end, like you're pushing baby, they're just not quite there yet. And we're seeing some D cells that we're worried about baby's heart rate and oxygen and whatever else. And we've tried and they're not coming, then we'll do a little snip and get them out. That even with the D cells that might not necessarily be an emergent situation that requires that to happen, that would be more on the like safer side of things for me though. If it's like, well, first time moms don't stretch as well, most first time moms are going to need an episiotomy. I'd be like, okay. Also, if you're down there and you recommend an episiotomy, can I say no? The truth is you can always say no. Yes, you can. But what do they say when you ask that question? So I would ask about episiotomies. How do you feel about unmedicated birth? And I would ask it even if you're choosing to have an epidural. But how do you feel about unmedicated birth? I would want to hear that. Like, how many women normally give birth unmedicated here? Do you find that, if I'm trying to go unmedicated, that I'll be supported, or is it going to be really hard, or, what? And I just want to hear kind of the feedback on that. Again, it's one of those things. I remember asking this question with my first provider, for example, and he said something like, I like to let my moms get their epidurals earlier than most doctors, because why be in pain longer if you don't have to? And I'm over here like, oh my gosh, for me, it's not about the pain, it's not about that. It's like, I want to work through this experience. I want to feel the sensations of this. I want that opportunity to work through this hard thing. That is what I desire for myself. And then I had other reasons behind it, but it was really important to me to like hear that information. And I know it'll benefit you even if you were choosing to have an epidural, which is awesome. Do you have any vacations planned? I think that's a really important one, because if you don't ask this question, you won't know until it's really close to your due date if they have a vacation coming up. And that's where we have the conversations like, so I thought you were going to give birth by now already at like 39 and a half weeks. But this weekend, I'm supposed to be out of town, starting Saturday through the next week. I've already had this vacation planned with my family. So if you want me to be your provider, I recommend we induce tomorrow. It's conversations like that. You don't want those sprung on you, because then you have to decide, oh my gosh, I've spent this whole time with this guy that I trust or this girl that I trust. And now I've had this picture in my mind of like, who's going to be there. And now I don't know what it's like. It's too much. It's too much. And you don't want to have to worry about it. So if they're going to be out of town, you ask about vacations. I would check with them, because when you ask them at the beginning of your pregnancy, chances are they haven't made their year calendar. Maybe they come up with a vacation later on. So I would ask again, second trimester. I would ask again, third trimester. And I would say, if you have any vacations planned, who's your backup and can I meet them? I would like to meet them, particularly if you're in like a one-on-one practice where like this is going to be your provider. Let me meet your backups. And that goes for even if you are not, if they don't have any vacations planned, I would ask in case of emergency, right? Like maybe the doctor has something that's going on. Maybe they're sick, whatever comes up. Who will be attending my birth? Like, will it be you for sure? And if not, who else will it be? And will I have an opportunity to meet them? So those are kind of some of my top questions. I'm going to link in the show notes for you guys. And we have these, if you follow us on Instagram too, they're in the link in the bio, because I think they're just so important that I think everybody should have them. But I'm going to list, and I kind of went into detail on the like whys behind them, and kind of like some more, like some deeper questions or like side questions that you can ask particular to your situation, but just as things that help you like get information, But I will also link in the show notes the provider questions that we have. And we have like, if you're with an OB or a midwife in the hospital, and if you're with an out of hospital midwife, here's some different questions that you may consider. And I recommend looking through both of them. Just download both of them, read through them, see if that's something that sounds good to you. Overall, I think probably the most important thing that I want everyone to realize that's listening is you have a lot more power than you realize when it comes to your birth experience. And I want you to take that power and run. Like, I just want you to have it for yourself and hold on to it and work with your birth partner and get this birth that you were desiring. And that starts with, how you're going to find your provider, where you're planning to give birth, and then how you're going to vet that provider or get to know that provider so that you can choose how to respond to situations that come up during pregnancy and during labor and birth. And I think most importantly, out of all of that, if you can be on the same page with your birth support, starting with your birth partner, and you've got the education and knowledge behind it, whether you're listening to podcasts and watching videos online or looking at birth videos or however you choose to educate yourself, or you take a good birth course, and then you're talking and communicating with your birth partner about all those really important things, what matters to you, what your desires are for your birth, how you plan to get there, how you want them to act and behave during labor and birth. For example, if you're like, here's my birth plan, this is what I want. Okay, well, what do you expect of dad? Is he supposed to be like, hey, she doesn't want that? Like, do you need him standing up for you? Or is it like, I just need you to know this information because I don't care, I'm going to do what I want anyways? You know, it's based off your personality. It's based off the knowledge, but you guys have to work together. And I hope that you do that. And then I hope you go and find an excellent provider and have the birth of your dreams and come back just like Leanna to tell me all about it on the podcast. I love you guys. I'm rooting for you. I am here. I am your biggest cheerleader. I hope that you guys all know that. And I will see you next week. That's it for this week, but make sure you subscribe to the podcast so that you get notifications first as I drop a new episode every week. And don't forget to head over to myessentialbirth.com for all of the free downloads mentioned here and to join the birth course and community serving pregnant moms just like you. If you enjoyed this and other episodes, I would love it if you would take a few minutes to leave a review on Apple Podcasts. I read every single one and include one at the beginning of each episode. See you next week.